What if living in your city became a luxury you could no longer afford? This isn't a future scenario. It's the harsh reality for many people in Europe today. In some of the continent's most charming cities, the dream of having a home has turned into a nightmare. Rent prices are sky high, buying is impossible, and local wages are simply no longer enough. In this video, you'll discover some of the European cities where the housing crisis is literally pushing residents to the margins, as we explore the shocking prices and the hidden causes behind them. Of course, we won't be able to cover every city facing this problem, so let us know in the comments about others you're aware of. Welcome to this new video from Amazing Europe. Number 1. Milan. Milan, the economic capital of Italy, is facing an unprecedented housing crisis that is profoundly reshaping the city's social fabric. Milan's real estate market has become a battleground where prices have reached unsustainable levels. A studio apartment rents for between 900 and 1,100 euros per month, while a one-bedroom flat requires at least 1,300 euros. Buying a home is even more prohibitive, with average prices exceeding 5,400 euros per square metre, and in some areas reaching astronomical figures of up to 17,000 euros per square metre. Despite Milan boasting the highest average salary in Italy, around 37,000 euros gross per year, this is no longer enough to keep up with the surge in housing costs. The Milanese paradox doesn't stem from a lack of housing, but from its economic inaccessibility, made worse by factors such as the proliferation of short-term rentals and the financialization of the housing market. Large investors are buying properties not to live in or rent out long-term, but as speculative assets, waiting for their value to increase in order to maximize future profits. This frustration has sparked major protests like Tents in the Square, where students demonstrated against exorbitant rents, paying up to 600 euros for a single room. Public outrage is growing in the face of listings with increasingly outrageous demands. On the political front, the debate is centered on regulating short-term rentals, especially those through Airbnb, which are accused of taking homes away from residents, and on the chronic lack of social housing, with thousands of public apartments left unused due to poor maintenance. The initiatives promoted by local institutions seem insufficient and too slow when compared to the urgency of the situation, which is gradually turning Milan into an exclusive city, increasingly inaccessible for middle and lower income groups who are being forced to relocate elsewhere. Number 2. Prague. Prague presents itself as a cruel paradox, a city of breathtaking beauty, yet increasingly inaccessible for those who simply want to live there. In its historic centre, renting a one-bedroom apartment costs between 1,000 and 1,600 euros per month, and even moving further out, prices rarely drop below 1,000 euros. Buying a home is even more prohibitive, with an average price of 5,500 euros per square metre, rising to 8,000 euros in the most sought-after areas. The situation is rapidly worsening. In 2024, prices increased by 15% compared to the previous year. The disproportion becomes striking when you consider that the average net salary is only around 1,450 euros per month, creating one of the widest gaps in Europe between income and housing costs. In fact, an average worker would need to save their entire salary for 18 years just to afford a modest 70 square metre apartment. This crisis stems from a fundamental imbalance between rising demand and insufficient supply. The sharp decline in building permits, combined with mortgage rates close to 6%, has practically paralysed the new construction sector, putting even more pressure on the already overloaded rental market. The continuous influx of international students and workers intensifies competition, especially for small apartments, which are the most sought after and see the highest price increases. Exhausting bureaucracy, which requires 246 days just to obtain a building permit, policies that encourage speculative investment, and the lack of social housing turn the search for a home into a real battle. Authorities are trying to respond with measures such as regulating tourist rentals and promoting co-housing projects, but political and bureaucratic obstacles continue to slow down the implementation of effective solutions. Number 3. Belgrade. Belgrade, once considered an oasis of affordability in the Balkans, is now experiencing a dramatic housing crisis that is turning the dream of owning a home into a mirage for the majority of its residents. Rental costs have reached alarming levels, with monthly rents ranging from €600 to €1,200 for an average apartment, figures that quickly drain family budgets. Buying property has become even more prohibitive, with average prices between €2,000 and €3,000 per square metre, and peaks up to €10,000 in central areas and luxury developments like Belgrade waterfront. The gap between aspirations and possibilities is widening dramatically. Surely, for many of you, these figures may not seem high, but with an average net salary of just €900 per month, a Belgrader would need to save their entire salary for nearly 22 years to buy a 70 square metre apartment. At the root of this housing storm is the massive influx of Russian and Ukrainian citizens after 2022, mainly IT professionals with salaries far above the local average, who have driven prices up by 30 to 50% in a very short time. Added to this is speculation by both local and foreign investors, the spread of short-term tourist rentals, and an urban planning strategy that favours prestige projects over social housing. The result is a city increasingly polarised, where growing economic inequality is mirrored in the urban landscape. Many residents feel they are being gradually pushed out of their own city, which is seeing a rising number of homeless people each year. In this regard, the words of Belgrade's mayor caused quite a stir. This is proof that Belgrade has become a true metropolis, because the richest cities have a homelessness problem. Number 4. Amsterdam. Amsterdam, with its picturesque canals and vibrant urban culture, hides a dramatic reality for those dreaming of living there. In this city, the right to housing is increasingly becoming a privilege reserved for a few. The numbers speak clearly. Rents range between €800 and €1,200 for a modest studio, reaching up to €2,500 for larger or more central apartments. Even a single room can cost up to €800, a prohibitive amount for students and young workers. Buying a home is even more shocking, with average prices between €6,000 and €7,000 per square metre, soaring to €8,000 to €10,000 in the most sought-after areas. A 70 square metre apartment would cost around €455,000. And the surprising part is that this figure has doubled in just 10 years. Despite relatively high average net salaries, €2,700 per month, it would still take between 10 and 15 years of full income just to cover the cost of the property. The crisis stems from a perfect storm of factors: explosive demand driven by international professionals and students, a housing supply that fails to keep up, massive speculative investment, accounting for 25% of the market, and of course, the removal of thousands of homes from the market for short-term tourist rentals. The institutional response appears insufficient. Despite attempts to regulate rentals, ban speculative purchases under €533,000, and plans to build 7,500 new homes per year, the social crisis persists. The city now has around 3,000 economic homeless, people who have a job but no home, while waiting lists for social housing have reached the incredible length of 18 years. Number 5. Athens. Athens is experiencing a disturbing paradox. Its post-crisis economic recovery is suffocating the very people who should be benefiting from it. Rents have exploded, rising by 30 to 50% in just a few years. A standard apartment now costs between €480 and €960 per month, easily exceeding €1,000 in central areas. Buying property is even more prohibitive. Average prices range from €1,500 to €2,500 per square metre, climbing up to €5,000 in the most desirable neighbourhoods. The situation becomes even more dramatic when these prices are compared to the average net salary, which barely exceeds €1,000 per month. This housing storm is fueled primarily by the explosion of short-term tourist rentals, which have removed thousands of apartments from the residential market. The controversial Golden Visa program, which grants residence permits to foreign investors who purchase property, recently increased from €250,000 to €500,000, has further overheated the market. Political responses appear insufficient, despite recent attempts such as a ban on new short-term rental registrations in central districts starting January 2025, and tax incentives for those who choose long-term rentals. The result is accelerated gentrification, transforming entire historic neighbourhoods into tourist enclaves, displacing original residents and altering the city's social fabric. Young people, students and low to middle income families are the most affected, forced to choose between unaffordable rents or exile to distant suburbs. In this context, some argue that at least tourism brings wealth to Athens, but the city's mayor disagrees. The politician stated that tourism brings the capital only 40 cents per resident per year. Number 6. Split. Split may be a small city of just 160,000 inhabitants, but we've included it on this list to show that even smaller cities can suffer the contradictory consequences of mass tourism. This coastal gem of Croatia, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is turning its charm into a nightmare for locals looking for a place to live. Renting a medium-sized apartment between 50 and 70 square metres costs between 600 and 1,000 euros per month, or even more, since many property owners prefer lucrative short-term tourist rentals over long-term leases. This has drastically dried up housing availability for residents. Buying property is an even more distant dream. Average prices exceed 3,000 to 4,000 euros per square metre and reach 5,000 to 6,000 euros or more in the most sought-after areas. To be precise, in 2025, the median price for an apartment is nearly 4,700 euros per square metre. And what about salaries? The average net income in Croatia and in Split hovers around 1,400 euros per month. This creates a brutal gap. To buy an average apartment, a local would have to work nearly 20 years without spending a single euro. The crisis is primarily driven by the tourism boom and the spread of short-term rentals, which have converted thousands of housing units that were once available to locals. Foreign investors with higher purchasing power and real estate speculation are further inflating prices. Add to that the limited supply of new affordable construction and the government's inadequate regulation of tourist rentals. And it's clear why locals feel unprotected. The direct result is growing gentrification that pushes native residents out of their own city, fueling resentment. Split is a striking example of how unregulated tourism can destroy housing accessibility for its citizens, turning the city into a showroom rather than a livable home. Number 7. Lisbon. Lisbon is a textbook case of a city rapidly losing its soul and culture. Rental and property prices have skyrocketed to astronomical levels, with studio flats renting for around 700 euros and larger apartments going for over 2,000 euros per month. When it comes to buying, prices easily surpass 5,000 euros per square metre, with peaks well above 10,000 euros in certain areas. The real tragedy becomes clear when you compare these prices to the average Portuguese net salary, which is stuck at just around 1,100 euros per month, a chasm that turns housing into an unattainable luxury. So, who lives in and owns these homes if the Portuguese themselves can no longer afford them? The answer lies in a radical demographic and cultural shift. Major investment initiatives and programs like the Golden Visa have drawn in foreign capital, placing real estate increasingly in the hands of international investors and buyers. People from China, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, Russia, the US, and European countries like France, the UK, and Germany, often with much greater purchasing power, have replaced local property owners. This transformation is not only economic, it's social and cultural too. Mass tourism, driven by the explosion of short-term rentals that have drained thousands of homes from the local market, has hollowed out Lisbon's historic neighbourhoods. Families, young people, and local workers are being forced to move to the outskirts or leave the city entirely. In their place, a constant flow of tourists and temporary residents is reshaping the city's social fabric. Historic shops are closing down, replaced by tourist-oriented businesses. The community is disintegrating, leaving long-time residents with the painful feeling of being strangers in their own city, once vibrant and accessible. now reduced to a showroom for the wealthy and a playground for visitors. Number 8. London. Now we step into one of the most sought-after cities on the planet, but also into a true housing nightmare. In London, renting is insane. A tiny studio flat costs over €1,750 per month, and even a single room can exceed €940. Buying is a distant dream for most, with average property prices surpassing €580,000 and central areas reaching over €10,000 to €20,000 per square metre. Even with higher than average salaries, around €3,000 net per month, housing costs swallow almost everything, making life extremely difficult for essential workers like nurses and teachers. But London's housing crisis is different from the ones we've seen so far. It's not just about tourism or short-term rentals. Its roots are deeper and far more global. The main cause? Overwhelming demand, driven by a powerful force, massive international investment. London's real estate market has turned into a global safe deposit box for money. Wealthy individuals and large investment funds buy up properties, often paying in cash and using hidden companies, not to live there, but simply to store and grow their wealth. This drives prices sky high, completely detaching them from what ordinary Londoners earn. On top of that, there's a long-standing, massive problem. Not enough homes are being built. The system to get construction permits is incredibly slow and complicated. A true bureaucratic wall that stops new projects before they even start. Affordable housing is desperately lacking. The result? A divided city where many long-time residents are being pushed out, unable to afford living in their own hometown anymore. Number 9. Tirana. Tirana is changing at record speed, with new buildings popping up everywhere. But behind this growth hides a harsh reality for its residents. Finding a home has become a nightmare. Rental prices have skyrocketed, although they are still lower than in other capitals. But the real shock is in the cost of buying. A square metre, which just a few years ago cost around €500 to €800, now easily exceeds €1,500 to €2,000, reaching peaks of €3,000 in new developments. Prices have doubled or even tripled in less than 10 years. The situation becomes brutal when we consider salaries. The average net income in Tirana is extremely low, around €700 per month. Buying an average apartment would require working almost 18 years without spending a single cent. The gap is enormous and impossible to bridge for most people. But why is this happening? The city is flooded with new constructions, but almost all of them are luxury properties. Long-time residents are being pushed aside by new buyers. A huge number come from the Albanian diaspora abroad, seeing property as a safe investment and buying en masse, which fuels a lot of speculation. There are also many Italian and Greek investors. Here, the issue isn't mass tourism, at least not yet, but rather the influx of capital and the desperate lack of affordable housing for the people who actually live and work in Tirana. The city is modernising, but at the expense of its own citizens. Before we reveal the 10th city, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to support our project by giving us a like, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. And don't forget, we recently launched our brand new channel, America vs Europe, where we compare US states, Canadian provinces, and European countries across various topics. Number 10. Paris. We couldn't end this list without mentioning the stunning French capital, where finding a home has become a true nightmare. Renting here is extremely expensive. A small studio apartment costs over €900 per month, and a one-bedroom apartment can easily reach €2,000. Buying is an almost impossible dream, with average prices exceeding €10,000 per square metre and reaching up to €20,000 in the most sought-after areas. Even with French salaries, around €2,500 net per month, housing costs consume a huge portion of one's income. But why is Paris so unaffordable? It's not just because of its global fame. There's a huge issue with space. The city is incredibly dense and can't build enough new housing due to historical preservation constraints. Like London, Paris attracts global investors who treat property as a speculative asset, driving prices sky high and completely disconnected from local wages. The paradox is shocking. Thousands of homes sit empty, purchased purely as investments, while thousands of Parisians are left without a roof over their heads. Bureaucracy is slow, and social housing is sorely lacking. Waiting times for a social apartment in Paris are counted in years, and in some cases can reach over 10 years, depending on income and family situation. Faced with this crisis, Parisians are not staying silent. There are frequent protests and demonstrations for housing rights. Various organisations carry out actions to denounce soaring prices and empty homes. Students and young people are also mobilising, fed up with unaffordable rents. People are calling loudly for stricter regulations and more affordable housing, so that the City of Light doesn't become just a museum for the rich. These are only 10 of many European cities experiencing this crisis. If you know of others, let us know in the comments. And you can't truly understand the full picture unless you also check out this video, where we show the top 10 European countries with the highest cost of living compared to the average salary. We also recommend taking a look at our new channel, America vs. Europe. We're sure you'll find it fascinating. That's it for this video. See you next time.